Srinivasan, the Academic Associate, Department of English, SUSS, Singapore. It is indeed a rare privilege to have such an acclaimed resource person to our webinar today. Let me on this great occasion invite and welcome Reverend Sister Maria FBS to this international webinar. Next, it is my pleasure and bounden duty to welcome our principal, Dr. Gayatri, to our webinar. Then I wholeheartedly welcome our Vice Principal, Sister Amali Pushpam, present on this seminar today. Amidst her various commitment, Reverend Sister Bartholomew, our administrator, is present with us for this webinar. Most welcome, sister. My list of persons to be welcomed will be complete only when I, arms outstretched, welcome all the students and staff from various other institutions and colleges. Hearty welcome to you all. Finally, I should mention all the students and faculty members of our college present for this webinar. Welcome students and the respected staff. Welcome one and all and be enriched by attending our one-day international webinar on what can literature do to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, I welcome our respected principal, ma'am, to give the presidential address.
A very good morning to all. God's word is the lamp for my feet and the light on my path. True freedom is impossible without a mind made free by discipline. A very warm and pleasant morning to all. I wholeheartedly welcome our chief guest, Dr. Rajeshwari, and participants from various college professors and other college students, and my dear students. Welcome you all who are gathered here through this virtual mode and who are enjoying their freedom through their disciplined lifestyle. I am extremely happy to meet you all virtually and join with you in this international webinar on what literature can do to you. Literature is an art form. Yes, it is, and everyone views literature from this aspect only. Beyond this, it shows versatile dimensions and deals with every aspect of life. Literature and life of society reflect upon each other. Life molds literature of a society, and literature reflects the real pattern of any society. Literature grows out of life, reacts upon life, and fed by life. With the ability to see the world with a pair of fresh eyes, it triggers the readers to reflect upon their own lives. It indeed reflects the society, its good values and its ills. In its corrective function, literature mirrors the ills of the society with a view to making the society realize its mistakes and make amends. It also projects the virtues or good values in the society for people emulate. We can firmly say that literature is the foundation of religion. The Holy Bible, one of the oldest written scriptures, is completion of tales, beliefs, and accounts that teach about Christianity with a span of more than 1,000 years from the prophet Moses to Apostle Paul. Bible was written by numerous authors believed to be inspired by God's divine wisdom and tried to explain about the mysteries of life as well as setting rules for one's personal faith. The same goes with Quran for Muslims, Torah for Jews, and Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, and Vedas for the Hindus. Literature can be used as an instrument of revolution, and it is used by many. And I believe that only person who can share plenty of inputs regarding this phenomenally is our chief guest, Dr. Rajeshwari Srinivasan, Academic Associate, Department of English, SUSS, Singapore. We so blessed and fortunate to have you, madam. Thank you for accepting our invitation and joining with us today. Here, I want to congratulate to the organizing Department of English. Their efforts are splendid. I don't want to take much of your precious time. And finally, I extend my wishes to all the participants to have great day of learning. Thank you, one and all. Thank you. I wholeheartedly welcome our chief guest, Dr. Rajeshwari, madam. Welcome, madam.
Thank you, ma'am, for your encouraging words. Now, I would like to call our beloved Reverend Sister Amali Pushpam, Vice Principal, for delivering felicitation.
My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. Respected Principal, Honorable Chief Guest, all the faculty members, and my dear students. Good morning to all. First of all, we congratulate all the organizer and participants of this international conference. There are some special moments and occasions in our life that bring us together. This program has given that special chance to meet you all virtually during this pandemic period. So I thank the committee members for this opportunity. I appreciate organizers for having selected the off topic during this period, that is, what literature can do to you. Literature and our day-to-day life are inseparable. It is intertwined with life. It beautifies the life and polishes and shines it. You can see the flowers, but if you want to admire, literature should be there. Hence, literature is needed to lead a beautiful and meaningful life. Especially during this pandemic period, its importance is heavily realized. Once again, I congratulate
Thank you, sister, for your encouraging and motivating words. Now I request Ms. Vanilla, Head, Department of English, to introduce the resource person.
with the words of mine, excellence is not being the best. It's doing your best. On behalf of our institution and behalf of our Department of English, I offer my greetings to our beloved Secretary, Reverend Dr. Sister Mariamman, who is far away in physically, but she is rolling with us by her thoughts. Next, our lovable Principal, Dr. S. Gayatri Madam, who is always turning and tuning us with a pleasant, laughing face. Then, our Vice Principal, Reverend Sister Amali Pushpam, who is making and vibrating to do all the things, and all the academicians and the students from various phenomena. Next, I convey my deep gratitude to our chief guest of the day, who is accepting our invitations and take over the session. Before that, I am profusely overjoyed to take this opportunity to instigate our elocutionist. She has more than 24 years teaching experience as assistant professor of English in overseas and 21 years as experience as academic associate with the Singapore University of Social Science in the Department of English. She did her PhD in Afro-American Feminist Theatre and MPhil on T.S. Eliot's concept of culture with a special reference to his notes towards the definitions of culture. She has published more than 57 papers, and she was invited her as a speaker for webinars in various places. Here, I pleasure to indicate some important events about her. She has presented her views on coping mechanism for women and children in the pandemic in Bharatiyar and the Bharadasan universities in 2020. Next, social issues and causes in MD Muttaya Government Arts College for Women Dindukal in 2021. Next, cybercrime against women during COVID-19 pandemic in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Universities of Social Science MP in India. And she is very versatile to participate more than 800 Tamil talk shows called Pattimandram, giving spiritual discourses in Tamil and English, being a judge for a variety of multinational Pattimandram, and founder and managing director of Masters Academy of Speech and Training in Singapore, conducting bilingual speech programs for primary, secondary, and JC students, and also coaching them for paper presentation skills and webinar, and produced YouTube video series to contribute towards the promotions of ancient Tamil literature at the request of established literary organization Karaikudi Kamban Kalagam from India. Next, doing Telugu language interpretation in state courts and family courts in Singapore. And she has translated the poem Amor di Arte by Alfred Lawtonison and published in a Singapore literary magazine named as the Serangan Times. Written short stories, essays, and poems, and few were published in the SOFA and state and family courts translator, and doing English to Tamil translation and Tamil to English translator for Ministry of Manpower in Singapore, and doing more employment programs around the globe in Tamil and English. Really, we are very much blessed and gifted to have such a multi-faceted speaker. So I request our distinguished chief guest, Dr. Rajeshwari Srinivasan Madam, to give her precious inputs to the gathering. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me? Vanilla, are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to hear me? Is my sound
Yes,
okay
ma'am.
for
Yes,
you?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, give me a second. Give me 1 second.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You are able to see my screen, the PowerPoint screen? Are you
Yes,
able
ma'am.
to see my PowerPoint screen? Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
One moment, please. Sorry, I don't understand why it keeps disturbing. Sorry. Hello, good morning, everybody. I am Dr. Rajeswari Srinivasan, otherwise known as Raji Srinivasan from Singapore. I thank you very much for inviting me for this webinar. Secours College of Arts and Science for Women, I really thank you for inviting me to be the resource person today. And I especially thank Madam Vanilla for introducing me to this August forum. Well, today's topic is what can literature do to you? I understand it's a little bit unusual when you see this topic. People can ask why study literature. People can ask what's literature going to do to us? Yeah, unless we understand that literature has the capacity to do something to us, there's no point even in reading literature. Have we ever asked ourselves this question? What will the reading of literature, the study of literature, do to us as persons? There's a simple, truthful, straightforward answer to this, which nobody bothers to think. Like long ago, my professor, T.V. Subbarao, who was a Cambridge educated, was asked a question in the class. I asked him, Professor, I'm doing MA English, and there are many people who are literally making fun of it. They're asking, what's the value of you doing an MA English? Then he told me, just tell them a study of literature makes you a better human being. A study of literature allows you to turn inward into yourself, and it allows you to examine yourself. So if anyone says there's no value in studying literature or reading literature, or no value in reading anything related to that, just turn around and kick them, he told me. That's what I precisely did after that. A consistent study of good literature forces us to evaluate our thoughts and values on a continual basis. It badges us not to make value judgments of the past. It conditions, reshapes, and restructures our own responses to challenging social issues. It has the capacity to stop us becoming victims of our own prejudices against any sector of the society. You can be an engineer, a banker, a doctor, scientist, a mathematician, a financial tycoon, a baker, or a cab driver. Doesn't matter. Still, every single person must learn literature. Every single person must start reading literature. We have to accommodate time and space for literature in our private lives. If something has the capacity to change society in its entirety, if something has the capacity to eliminate negativity from the globe, literature is the backbone of that process. Without regular study of good literature, we may not be able to maintain distinctions between positive and negative attitudes in life, to avoid becoming cynical and to move towards creating a positive impact and leave behind us positive imprint. A study of good literature is a must for us. Always expressing his opinions with the severity, F.R. Lewis believed that literature should be closely related to the criticism of life. F.R. Lewis always believed that literature should be related to the criticism of life. And therefore, a literary critic's duty to assess works according to the author's and society's moral position is a must, according to him. And remember, every reader is a mini literary critic. If in any study of literature, honest criticism and sensitive appreciation should be directed not upon the writer, but upon the writings, to borrow the words of T.S. Eliot. But unfortunately, what's happening even in 21st century is a sad situation. Women's voices, many women's voices, as expressed through literature, are constantly badgered, subjugated, and criticized by directing the criticism upon the women writers instead of their writings. Still, if this is happening in 21st century, it simply shows that we are not educated enough. My speech is just an attempt today to present before you to show what can a study of literature do to you, with special reference to literature produced by women in English around the world. I will attempt to give a bird's eye view of the women writers of a few countries at least, if not all. Whether literature is didactic or not, it's definitely a reflection of the society from which the writer carves it out. Initially, Madam Principal Gayatri was focusing on the didactic nature of literature. I'm not even focusing on that. Whether it is didactic or not, I leave it to the reader. But definitely, literature is and should be a reflection of the society from which it is carved out totally. What better value, what better way to understand the human society could there be than reading literature? Reading of especially English literature not only gives reading pleasure, but it actually serves as a social history of the entire world in the current situation. This is most important. The social history of the entire world, in a nutshell, is conveyed to us very easily in this simple manner, simple, straightforward manner. Say, for example, once upon a time, British and American literatures were the only ones to which students were exposed to in the universities established in colonial countries until the advent of world literatures in English. In my time, I was mostly exposed to British and American literature in my younger days. For example, today, the other literatures we have to be familiar with are myriad. Even though I'm going to focus more on the women literature, I actually would want to talk about, give me a second. Someone is calling me from a university. Yes. Okay, sorry. I think they had some problem with they had a problem with, what is that? Give me a second. You have any problem in listening to me? Can anybody confirm that you are able to listen to me? Because someone was trying to contact you from your college to confirm that you are able to listen to me.
Yes, ma'am, we can listen.
Oh, okay. Because somebody was trying to call me from there. That's why. Okay. Back to the point. It's no longer English literature today, but literature written in English around the world. As I said, British and American literature are no longer the mainstream literatures. For example, African literature engaging with some of the important cultural and political dynamics shaping the work of renowned authors. Say, for example, give me a moment. You can see that. Old Soyinka is just one of them. You must have heard about Old Soyinka. Old Soyinka, Ugiwa Tingo, Athol Fugad, Ama Ata Aidu, Kensaro Wiwa, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. They are all African writers. Maybe difficult to pronounce their names, but easy to understand their literature. It could enrich the reader by triggering various layers of human consciousness. Ali Mazrui and others mentioned 7 conflicts as the themes of African English literature, which we are going to see in a short
Ma'am,
while.
sorry to interrupt you, ma'am.
Yeah?
We could not see your PPT.
Oh, okay. I don't understand why. Give me a second. Are you able to see it now? Can you see it now?
Ma'am, kindly in the slideshow option, kindly click the slideshow in the menu bar, ma'am.
Slideshow. Give me a second. I don't understand.
In the menu bar, you have the.
Yeah. I know. Are you able to see now? I already clicked that.
Ma'am, if you click the slideshow, it will be in the full mode view, ma'am. It will be.
Yeah, are you able to see now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Ah,
Ma'am,
okay.
we got it, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
no problem.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Say, for example, as I said, African literature actually talks about 7 conflicts as the themes of English literature. Say the clash between Africa's past and present, between tradition and modernity, between indigenous and foreign, between individualism and community, between socialism and capitalism, between development and self-reliance, and between Africanity and humanity. These are the conflicting themes of African English literature, or rather English literature as it is in Africa. So say, for example, if you refuse to read African literature, if you do not bother to look at African literature, it will be a great loss to us. A conscious reader who has allowed herself to be shaped by these critical works will find a new human being in herself. Is this not a good reason to read literature? I don't understand why it's like that, because I have put only in a slideshow option. I don't know why.
Yes, ma'am. Now it's clear, ma'am. Now it's clear, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
But
I don't understand why it keeps going like that.
oh, because the recording is going on, ma'am. That's why we are.
Yeah, I understand. Say another good example of why we read literature and what it can do to us. You have to look at gender studies. Say when just half a century ago, understanding of what used to be called as Black literature was not part of the mainstream study, and when Afro-American literature was still considered as a kind of subgenre, Afro-American feminist literature started serving as an expression of the untold pains and the patriarchal power structure that degraded women to second-grade citizenship. It's high time we really understand. It's high time we really understand why it has happened like that to the women. That's because we have not read their literature at all. A study of their literature alone would permit the entire world to accept the new realities of life. See, until date, in many parts of the world, even compilers of anthologies and historians demonstrate sexual imperialism. We have to attend to this. Literature can do to the reader what many a psychiatrist has been attempting to do to a patient for generations. A study of literature can cure a reader in a subtle, subconscious manner of the hard-held prejudices against any sector of the society. Say again, to use the same example, only with the reading of women's literature, the society is being slowly cured of dumb chick perception of women. Though still in some cultures, the expectation of women to be children producers, to be sweet, soft, fragile, innocent, brainless, patient, most adorable, adjustable creatures is still deep-rooted. You could easily trace it back to the kind of literature they are reading and the kind of literature they are neglecting to read, they are refusing to read. That is the cause of all these issues. This brings us to the next step of the study of literature. Blind, unplanned reading of literature, reading of fiction, could jeopardize our understanding of the society around us, and it could force us to form a corrupt mentality, a mentality that pushes us into further degeneration, a warped mentality that's harmful to the entire psyche of the humanity. So, once having decided to read literature, choosing the kind of literature that's going to form our mind-forming content is important, given the limited time each person has. I'm not talking only about the students of literature for whom reading of literature may be the mainstream activity and who may or may not continue to look upon it as a source for the living. I'm talking about each one of us who are branched into various fields and who will become a better human being if we choose to read the right kind of literature. We really have to look into that kind of literature. Say, for example, we should understand we are what we read. We believe when people say that we are what we eat. If our body is what we eat, our mind is what we read. So, reading pulp fiction is no different from eating fast food. In a society that has started using toxic fast food as the mainstay of life, pulp fiction readers have the mistaken belief that they are reading literature. To the once upon a time reading community of Mills and Boons and zebra romancers, the tough, tall, dark, arrogant, all-knowing, domineering, power-packed picture of a man would be under total disillusionment if they start reading real literature. Reading good literature is akin to a nation-building exercise. Reading literature that also takes us into a journey of the past history of human race, past history of the gender challenges that has paved way to our current demand for gender equality, could even make us better entrepreneurs in this economy-oriented society. A simple reading of Black women's literature could easily install the concept of Black is beautiful in us and stop us from chasing creations of boutique products, promising us of a fair skin tone. It could instill a sense of self-worth and pride in us, which is otherwise not easily imbibed by us in this convoluted society. Unless we read women's literature, we'll stop realizing the difference between appearance versus personality. At least in Indian context, we are forced to believe that our appearance is personality wrongly, especially when they use these words in Tamil, like thotram. The moment you say thotram, they understand what is thotram. The moment you say alumai, they understand what is alumai. But when it comes to English, most people, the vernacular setup, when they use the words like appearance and personality, they use it interchangeably. This is what should not happen. If we are reading real literature, we'll definitely know the difference between appearance and personality, which is very vital for our psychological ingredient as of today. For example, reading real literature by women, for humans, and about women across several cultures of the world could make every society to have the most needed understanding of the psyche of women. It's high time the society understands our unadulterated form of literature. It's an unadulterated account of how women have been constantly under political pressure. They are constantly under political pressure. They are constantly under all kinds of social pressures, economical oppression. Even civilized societies are not exceptions to this. As American feminist Ethel Klein once said, the critical dimension of women's lives, which traditionally were characterized by a stable family relationship centered around children and domestic production, changed around the turn of the century when the century became more urbanized and industrialized. At the same time, though it may be true with the American society, the very meaning of being female has been transformed in the 20th century when we read non-English literature, for example, at least in India, belonging to the same early part of the 20th century, we are in for a shock. In vernacular literature, the traditional role of women has been time and again reinforced, glorified, and formed as a strong mold from which any woman who wants to escape has been branded as a rebel misfit in the society. Her image has been tarnished. Any writing that attempts to demonstrate even some breakaway from the stereotype of women was looked down upon, unless that writing also comes from a male point of view. It's sad. I can give you a typical example. A typical example could be the Tamil writer Jayakanthan, whose writings have incorporated the challenges faced by the stereotyping of women and their social issues. He has talked about many issues faced by women. Good. At the same time, it could be easily understood that he could do what he could do in his capacity as a male writer. And that was the only reason these kind of issues were actually allowed to be placed in the mainstream literature. That is the issue. Even in the 20th century, what's called mainstream Tamil fictional writing is dominated by male writers and their perspective of women, their projections of how women should be and how women should shoulder major responsibility of holding the family together, and how women should police the family irrespective of how the so-called breadwinner, the man of the family, how he behaves, irrespective of that, irrespective of the usefulness of that guy. She is supposed to be subjugated to him. She is supposed to be quite reverential towards the male figurehead of a family, even if she is working and she is actually the breadwinner. Whether it's regional language literature or English literature, unless we realize that what is labeled as feminist literature, what is labeled as gender studies literature, what's labeled as women's studies literature become the mainstream literature, unless these labels are incorporated into mainstream literature, then our mind-forming content would continue to be corrupted. You have to make this as the part of mainstream literature to keep our mind healthy and positive. These different labels should no longer be treated as a counter-cultural writing or counter-cultural writing. If we do so, we'd be wasting a very powerful tool such as studying literature or sheer reading that could create major positive impact in our mind. Realizing the power that could be wielded by the study of literature in an unsuspecting human brain without any preconceived notion is the first step towards creating a positive, vibrant aura in the society we are in. Once we start realizing that reading literature is the only way to understand the society, is the only way to understand the society we are living in, it's going to be a problem. Because we really have to understand what is actually happening in the society only through the reading of literature. Say, for example, we have plenty of reading material around us. It's going to shape our growing years and pave way for a beautiful learning journey that our minds will start dissecting in due course. Still, it does not mean that we have to force ourselves to read very serious, complicated, and complex reading material forever to build our inner selves. Many a book that could have ignited the reading public has been banned in the past after its publication, even by the so-called advanced countries like the United States of America. For example, you would have definitely heard of Alice Walker's novel. She's a Black woman. Her novel, The Color Purple, won the Pulitzer Prize in 1983, making her the first Black woman to win such a prize. But the American Library Association had put that book under the top 100 banned books list even as recently as 2019, despite the book winning critical acclaim. Unless we start reading this book, it would be difficult to explain to people with preconceived notions what could reading this book could do to one's thinking and perception of the society around us. Say, for example, if you don't read this book, based on the banning imposed on this book, we'll continue to believe that this book talks about pornography, which is absolutely wrong. Ironically, commonly cited justification for banning the Color Purple book included sexual explicitness, explicit language, violence, and homosexuality. It's actually a different kind of society they are portraying there. But none of it was pursued, none of it was perceived as a taboo subject when non-women writers used such an explicit language. This is the point we have to understand when we read literature, to see what kind of atrocity a woman is undergoing, even if she is a writer. The book received greater scrutiny amidst controversy surrounding the release of its film adaptation in 1985. I suggest every person to grab a few hours to also watch the film adaptation of this book, The Color Purple, which is available in Netflix. This could open a Pandora's box and make us reevaluate our attitude towards the global community, about which we are very proud of. The controversy of the book, The Color Purple, centered around the depiction of Black men. It's not centered around the depiction of Black women. Ironically, they didn't want the portrayal of Black men that has been shown in this book, because they felt that some critics saw this as feeding stereotypical narratives of Black male violence, while others found the representation compelling and relatable. I found the representation compelling and relatable after having done a thesis on Afro-American feminist tradition in theater 31 years ago. Even today, I feel sad that several kinds of situation which I saw 31 years ago has not changed yet. Just reading one such compelling book would make a sea of change to the way we look at the society around us. One by one, late readings of Black women started focusing on not only the interracial, but also the intraracial and gender conflicts that exist in their society. Indian women's situation was no different from that in those days. That is another irony. Though definitely there is an improvement from the austere situation of Indian women. When we compare to the years, definitely we have a different situation today. When we are talking about at least gender studies, we still have a long way to go. For example, when I talk about literature, I still do not want it to be labeled as feminist literature or gender studies, simply because of those labels, mainstream literary readers refuse to read this. They have to be hoodwinked into reading this at least. Say an example would be reading of Anita Desai's novel. Definitely you've heard about the Indian woman writer Anita Desai. Reading of her novels forces the reader to examine the role and contribution of patriarchy and patriarchal values towards the misery, suffering, loneliness, and unhappiness of women. It further nudges us to look at other psychological, sociological, and economical problems experienced by women with better empathy. Not necessarily sympathy, it should be empathy. When we do not take reading literature as a serious vocation, we are going to deny ourselves of all these learning experiences. After all, life is a learning journey. Desai's 1963 novel, Cry the Peacock, her 1977 novel, Fire on the Mountain, her 1980 novel, Clear Light of the Sky, all these, we have to really look into that. Give me a moment. I hope you're able to see this. Then there's another novel by her in 1998, novel Fasting and Feasting. I've listed only a few. These could force a reader into becoming inward with oneself and chisel a person into a better personality. For example, Cry the Peacock, despite being her first novel, throws light into becoming inward with oneself. And it talks about conjugal disharmony, absence of personality, idealism, and a feeling of aimlessness in a woman's life. Just some time back, I spoke about the difference between appearance versus personality. Whatever be our appearance, it's God-given. We can just keep it as much as it creates confidence for us. That's all. But our personality is something we give to God. We give to God back. We give to ourselves. That is our personality. So I'm very sure we'll pay attention to this. There's another shocker from Arundhati Roy's God for Small Things. you know, like despite winning a Man Booker Prize in 1997, Arundhati Roy also has to face the same kind of problems. This definitely shows that give me a second. I don't understand why people keep raising hands and why probably they're unable to see. Okay, now hopefully you can see again. I don't understand the reason it keeps going back. Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things actually faced the same issues like Alice Walker's The Color Purple. Roy's book was criticized as expressing unrestrained sexuality and obscenity, even by the then Chief Minister of Kerala, E.K. Nayanar. These kind of criticism not only reveal a part of the novel, it actually tells us so much about the society from which she produced it. We can always feel free to criticize the writings, but not the writer. To teach this level of sanity, one must actually start reading literature by women writers. We have decided to start reading with Indian women writers in English. Apart from Desai and Rai, you could see the list I've given you here. Sashi Deshpande, Jhumpa Lahiri, Kiran Desai, Nayanthara Sagal, Kamala Markandeya, Shobha De, Anita Nair, Amrita Preetham, and Sudha Murthy. I have actually missed typing out her name here. You can actually go back to Thorodath and Sarojini Naidu also. Should read all these people to understand the evolution of human history from the point of view of women in India. So once again, we have to ask ourselves, what are we denying ourselves if we do not read such a literature on a regular basis? The rich experiences of the world should not be denied to us just because we have prejudiced mentality about picking up women's literature for our reading. The day we stop reading literature, we'll actually be no longer living our lives in a holistic manner. Actually, to move on to another region, what Singapore women poet Christian Chia has spoken, it's actually very, very relevant here. She has written, and then she says about her own writing, I hope my books will make someone feel less lonely and give them hope that things do get better as long as they keep doing, even though the downs can outnumber the ups in the short or medium term. It can be a wait of maybe 10 years or more, but as long as you don't give up, good times will come, says Christian Chia. And this is what we need after reading literature, especially after reading literature written by women. You feel that, hey, this will also pass by. Good times will definitely come. If this confidence is instilled in you, what better reason can be than reading literature, right? So now I move the radar to Malaysian women writing, because as I told you initially, my purpose here is to give you a bird's eye view of the women's writer around the region. And actually, most of them are neglected people about whom nobody has thought much. In the Malaysian women writers, there are plenty, but unfortunately, Tamil, Malay, Mandarin, they write in these languages, and in those languages, maybe they are published with their own expenses. And the Malaysian women writers who write in English are forced to depend upon electronic media, as the publishing industry itself is in favor of school books publishing, and its sale leave little room for fiction or non-fiction written in English. That's the sad situation in Malaysia. Against these odds, the women writers there have struggled and risen to prove that their bold literature need not be colonial, and they are capable of pushing the boundaries beyond colonial literature. According to the reviewers who actually look at the Malaysian women writers in English, they feel that these writers understand that colonial stories are expected of them. But while colonial history is important, it's not their only history. What we learn from the way their writings are shaping up is that our fixation with the past belies an ability to beckon with it. And doing so, we are unable to imagine different possible lives. These writers' work suggests a hidden richness that has been poorly acknowledged, and a courageousness to break with those old expectations. It's the honest stories, the ones that speak to our Malaysia's messy, unjust history, and the calamities in their aftermath that have long been missing from a normal conversation. It is these we find in their literature. These Malaysian women writers are changing the game by insisting on the value of their stories and perspectives. Y.Z. Chin, Cassandra Ka, Geeta, Melissa Rani Selva are a few such writers whose writings could throw light into a complex Malaysian society that is governed very strictly by very strict religious principles, despite widespread education among women there. And there is this lady, Rani Manika. She is quite special. You know why? Rani Manika offers a different kind of literary experience to her readers. We must read. Her first novel, The Rice Mother, infused with her own Sri Lankan family history, is a vividly imaginative story about the frailties of human nature and the terrible consequences of war. Rani Manika has a Sri Lankan family background, but she herself was born and brought up in Malaysia, and with Malaysia, and then she has been shuttling between Malaysia and UK. So she's a unique combination. And her Rice Mother won a Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 2003. Her subsequent novel, Touching Earth, is a dark and compelling tale of love, betrayal, and addiction. The Japanese lover set in 20th century Malaya during the Japanese occupation, and it is an absorbing tale of the intense passion between the captor and the captured. So Rani's books have been actually translated into 26 different languages. Her novels continue to rock the show as she showcases her rare combination of Sri Lankan background. You see, an average reader who reads actually is elevated beyond an average level. He or she is moved to the supersonic level. It could push our average boundary beyond its limit by pumping in newer understanding of the world beyond us. Average colonial readers who have looked at British colonialism alone as a major threat would be in for a shock when they read about Japanese occupation in the Malayan region. Malaysia, Singapore, all were affected. The history of this region is infused into the writings of these women writers whose experiences as women and their point of view of life are great takeaway for any student of literature. Now we shift our focus to another interesting neglected part of the world. Yes, the moment we talk about Pakistan, we talk about all kinds of border struggles with India, all kinds of religious struggles, struggles with Afghanistan, and all kinds of struggle, except in terms of women literature. And that is where I want to introduce these women to you. It's high time we look at the Pakistani women writers in English. Fatima Bhutto, Shaila Abdullah, Kamila Shamsi, Nafiza Haji, Bina Shah, Saba Imtiaz, Rafia Zakaria, Sabine Javeri, Aisha Tariq, Uzma Aslam Khan, Sana Munir, and Annie Ali Khan, just to mention a few of them. What is the point of mentioning? You ask, right? I can hear your mind voice. The point of mentioning is, at the end of today's webinar, I want to see at least few of you go back and Google on these writers and pick up any writer you like, any writer you fancy, and read upon them, read on them, read works by them, and a Pandora's box open for you. The Shadow of the Crescent Moon by Fatima Bhutto has been praised for Bhutto's descriptions and attention to detail, but has been widely criticized for what's perceived the very biased nature of her lens as she paints the Pakistani army with as black as a brush as possible, according to a few reviews. The novel gives the benefit of the doubt to the Taliban and portrays life under their rule as one where women have many choices rather than stark and inflexible rules. Other critics point out that the novel doesn't consider that one of the characters, Samara's actions, a character in that novel, could possibly be flawed, as she is always considered a heroic freedom fighter and never a potential terrorist. Well, there's the existence of the 1961 Muslim Family Law Ordinance, which regulated marriage and divorce. Polygamy still continues to have a significant legal impact on the women of Pakistan. We could also perceive the paradox of such a place like Pakistan through the reading experience of the Pakistani women writers' creations. The feminist movement in Pakistan, yes, believe me, feminist movement in Pakistan. You know why? If this expression shocks you, it means you have not read anything about Pakistan other than the newspaper articles on Pakistan. The feminist movement in Pakistan entered a crucial period. After 2008, with the advent of private media channels and social media, the movement gained momentum as women were increasingly able to share the ideas and beliefs. Aurat March, it's called, women marches, are now being held in numerous cities over the country. The subjects and issues raised by the marches include increased political participation and representation of women, gender, and sexual minorities, religious minorities, and other marginalized groups in Pakistan. The movement also has demanded for public spaces to be made safer, not only for women, but also for transgender people. And they have called to end all violence against women and transgender people in these movements. Unless we are able to read Pakistani writings of fiction and non-fiction by women writers with an open mind, will not be able to identify all the above factors, which definitely contribute to developing our own holistic personality. This is just another example of what can a study of literature do to us. It could once again widen our perspective of the countries from which such literature is produced with an insider's point of view. Though literature written by men could be easily available, if we really have to understand different perspectives of society, we have to focus on reading writings by women, even if they are not necessarily what is labeled as feminism nowadays. A woman's perspective, a woman's very perspective of the society could be subtle. It could be a blatant criticism of the culture from which the writing is born. Unless we make an attempt at a study of literature, all these rich experiences would become non-existent for us. So, at least now I think we have already realized, not only for women, even men should start reading more and more of women's literature. We need not be novelists, poets, dramatists, or non-fiction writers to appreciate the writings of any of these women. We just need to be ready to expand our horizons of learning by being a normal reader, open to reading from different territories. To understand what emerging women in literature across the globe can do to a conscious reader, we have the experience to believe that an inward reading of this kind of literature is what's needed for turning around the current society into a better place to live. And then the next slide, if it gives you a shock, I'm not responsible for it. Wait and see that. From Pakistan, our radar shifts to Arab countries. Women writers in Arab countries. Yes. The 1942 born Ghada Al Saman is a Syrian writer who is a novelist come journalist. She has more than 40 published works, which includes everything from novels and short stories to poetry and journal entries. And this is regarded as one of the most influential voices of gender equality in the Arab world. So after all, the jaundiced eyes with which the world has been looking at the Arab world may not be exactly 100% correct. There may be another dimension to that. The 1931 born Nawal El Sadawi, she's another writer. She's the second most translated author from Arabic after Najib or Nahib Mahfouz, who is another Egyptian male writer. Nawal Sadawi is an Egyptian writer and a doctor, and is often described as the Simone de Beauvoir of the Arab world. Why? Because Nawal Sadawi, in her feminist non-fiction on subjects pertaining to gender equality and patriarchal and class oppression, she has aced everybody. She has specifically written on a subject which is a taboo even today. She has written on the subject of women in Islam, paying particular attention to the practice of female genital mutilation in her society. She has written a non-fiction. It's a pure record which we must know to understand what's happening. Then there's Asiya Jabbar, 1936 born, and she's no longer alive. 2015, she passed away. A noted feminist author from that region. She has explored the plight of Algerian women within a post-colonial context. So after all, women writers are responsible to bring out more and more of that lesser known regions in terms of literature. Then there is Inam Kachachi, 1952 born Inam Kachachi, moved to France for a PhD later. She's an Iraqi writer. What do we know about Iraq? Iraq means war for us. But you see, here is an undiscovered diamond among Iraqi writers, a woman writer, Inam Kachachi. And then Sahar Khalifa. Sahar Khalifa is one of the most important living Palestinian novelists. Sahar Khalifa is known for her work that examines the daily lives of Palestinians under occupation. She has written fiction and non-fiction, ranging from novels to many articles and journal articles that explore topics of discrimination and oppression of Arabic women. Have we read about these things before? We have not read. So that is why I keep insisting, men and women, transgender people, every one of us must read this. What Arab world has offered or denied women cannot be discussed and interpreted from literature produced by men from that region or men from elsewhere in the world. We really have to pay attention to this. And then there's another part of the world to which we have not paid attention in terms of writing, and that is Myanmar. I hope you're able to see still. Okay. When we talk about Myanmar, we have to look at writers like, but unfortunately, these Myanmar writers, all of the writings are not available in English. Of course, partially, a couple of writers' writings are available in English. People are attempting to translate it. Meochit and Aung San Suu Kyi wrote partially in English. Singapore-based writer Nilanjana Sengupta launched her scholarly book, The Female Voice of Myanmar, Kin Meochit to Aung San Suu Kyi, in 2015. This book provides a good introduction to at least 4 such Myanmar women writers who have not been even read by other parts of the world. Kin Meochit, Ludu Da Amar, Matida, Da Aung San Suu Kyi are just a few of the writers. It's the duty of women in other parts of the world to make effort to bring out their unheard voices to the rest of the globe, which Nilanjana Sengupta had started. Once again, let us ask ourselves this question now. What can a study of literature do to us? Now we are slowly emerging into a global citizen, isn't it? Without a passport, a human can cross all the geographical boundaries. They can examine all past histories and look into current reflection of the society with the practiced ease when we glue ourselves to the choices, writings of all the women writers. Even history books, when you read, if you choose to read history books written by women writers, it could offer you a different perspective of the past world. I'm not forcing anyone not to read writing by male writers, okay? I'm not anti-male. The world has been reading only male writers so much, so I'm now appealing to the rest of the world. I'm appealing to male writers themselves. Look, we have been reading your work. Good. Now you start reading our works too to understand how your own works can be enriched. You read. We will all know how to read, how to live a life, how to coexist with each other in a beautiful manner in this Mother Earth. We have to know. To understand what's called peaceful coexistence, we have to read more and more of the women writers. And then, as the award-winning author Carl Mueller once remarked, there's another writer, another part of the world, which really we have to move on now. That is the writers from Sri Lanka, women writers from Sri Lanka. When we look at women writers from Sri Lanka, Women have become the standard bearers of Sri Lankan writing in English in the past 50 years. Carl Mueller says so. Rosalind Mendes, she made history in 1928 as the first Sri Lankan woman to publish a novel. After her, a handful of Sri Lankan women emerged writing into English. They also played a very important role, perhaps even more important role than their male contemporaries in the shaping of the Sri Lankan English literary tradition. Groundbreaking writer Jean Linnet of Dutch descent, marriage to her husband Tyagaraja Arasanayagam of Tamil ethnicity, combined with the events of Black July. You want to know what's Black July? Go on Google 24th July, 1983, if I remember the year right. Black July, you just type, you will know what is that. That was a kind of a ethnic war that happened in Sri Lanka. And Jean Linnet Arasanayagam, she was inspired by that. She was disturbed by that. Her own writing was inspired and disturbed by Black July. It inspired the solemn themes of ethnic and religious conflict found in the war poetry for which she is most well known. Yasmin Gunaratne, another writer, is a vocal advocate of women's rights and empowerment. And she has even compiled a book celebrating women in Sri Lankan English literature. Then another impactful writer, Annie Ranasinghe. Her proximity to both the Nazi Holocaust. Annie Ranasinghe has a kind of a German background also. She has a kind of a combination of a Nazi Holocaust and the civil war in Sri Lanka. It makes for an interesting and stirring juxtaposition of experiences which come together to form a collection of poetry and prose that focus primarily on the themes of violence, alienation, and minority persecution. Then Punyakanta Vijayanayake's writing, which spans over 100 short stories and several novels, it concerns itself exclusively with the Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan life. So what I'm appealing here is, you want to know about Sri Lanka, we have read enough of non-fiction. We have actually read enough written by the newspapers. We have seen enough of CNN, BBC, whatever, about whatever is happening in Sri Lanka. It's high time we start reading the women's writer of Sri Lanka to actually understand a different perspective, just to see a different kind of who they are and what has actually happened in Sri Lanka and how Sri Lanka has changed. And then now I move on to Indonesia. When we scan further to see what are the layers of experience a study of literature can do to us, we could look at Indonesian women writers. Don't worry, with this, most probably after this, in a few minutes, we are ending. The country that's barely known to the outside world for its literature is taken to the center stage by 7 of the Indonesian women writers in 2019 during the London Book Fair. One such writer is D. Lestari, whose books Supernova and Paper Boats have both been translated into English. A review written by poet Taufik Ismail helps us to understand the kind of experience that this could offer to any reader who is approaching D. Lestari for the first time with an open mind. Open mind is the key term. Whosoever book you want to read, open mind is the key term. A renewal has taken place in Indonesian literature over the past decade. Supernova is an intelligent, unique, and truly exciting exploration of science, spirituality, and the nature of love. So these kind of commentary I purposely quote here to allure you into reading this book. The literary critic Jacob Somajato suggests this is an attractive novel by a young writer, a very young person. It's an intellectual work in the form of a book, in the form of a pop art actually, set in the real world. It opposes world values with a new way of understanding, so the readers can see the world in a different way. We cannot imagine what it should have taken for Lestari to talk about unconventional love stories, straight and gay love stories, with a dash of spirituality added to that in a country like Indonesia. An unbiased reading of a work improves our understanding of different cultures across the world from a woman's point of view. you see, what is perceived as a taboo is shattered through skillful presentation. When it's converted into a literary work, a study of literature does shatter our mental barriers. It shatters our own self-built taboos and our judgments of other cultures. And when it's written by women, we can identify ourselves with different cultures. What better reason to study literature? You see, there are further writers there in Indonesia, women writers. Veda Gaudiamo, a journalist, story writer, young adult novelist. Then Laxmi Pamunjat, she has written on Indonesian culture and politics. Then Shaila Rusvita Putri, who writes short stories that explore everyday life in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia. Then the Sydney-based Indonesian woman writer Intan Paramadita, who explores gender, sexuality, and politics in a work. Actually, it has won the Pen Translates Award for her debut novel, The Wandering. Then Laila Chowdhury, she's an author, screenwriter, and journalist whose debut novel, Pulang, about a group of Indonesian political exiles in Europe, it won the Katulistiwa Award for Best Prize in 2013. So the Indonesian women writers I mentioned here might not create a mental havoc among the readers, but please understand, they do create a clearer perspective of the country, which has the largest Muslim population in the world, approximately 225 million Muslims. A leisurely approach towards the writings has the capacity to change our outlook of not only Indonesia, but also our perspective of what is considered taboo in such a country. What I have shared with you all today is just a sample. It's just a sample of what can literature do to us. Actually, I did not want to give the title as women's study or women's literature. You know why? As that would have increased our affective filters even before I had started this lecture. The moment I use the word women's study, women's literature, gender studies, feminism, I've seen many a man pushing it away, honestly. So with that self-centered attitude, I decided to change the title as to what can study of literature do to us. Also with another intention to make the audience understand that when I say study of literature, when I say mainstream literature, women's writing, feminist writing, gender studies, all are mainstream literature. This is another important point I wanted to share with you all today. Unless we accept this, women's studies and writing by women writers will not be streamed into the mainstream at all. At the same time, when literature produced by women in English across the countries is read with open mind by all the three genders, our lives would be enriched. If becoming a better human being and becoming a holistic personality are not compelling reasons enough to study literature, what else do you think could be a better reason to study literature? See, my only concern is when you study literature, we study literature for a compelling reason. That compelling reason is you are going to be a different person. You will be reborn. You will be reshaped. You will be restructured, not by any other human being. You are actually sent to your own personal rehabilitation center created by your own effort. You have a tool in your hand, the women writers writing from around the world. And remember, it is not British literature. It is not American literature. It is literature written by women around the world in English. So with these words, I thank one and all for being a part of today's program. And I thank Madam Vanilla for initiating me to do this. And I really thank your August webinar forum. And I thank wholeheartedly to the College, Secours Arts and Sciences for organizing this program. It has even attracted one of my people from Singapore into this. I'm very happy about it. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thanks a ton for each one of you. Thank you. You are feel free to ask me any questions. Whatever I can answer. Okay, thank you.
Callers, if you have any questions, you can ask. Ma'am, there is a question or a suggestion in the chat box. Can you see?
I can't see. Give me a second. I'll see how. Give me one moment, please.
I
can't see that. Wait a second. Where is the question, ma'am? Which question you are referring to, ma'am?
Ma'am, it's not a question. It's asking for a suggestion.
Yeah.
Can I read, ma'am?
Yeah, please.
It's from Dr. Enola Aruchelvi Parvada. So some say that African literature cannot be taken for research work as African writers use broken English. May I have some explanation?
Oh my God, I'm really happy to receive this question. You see, like 31 years ago, 31 or even more than that, I mean 33 years ago, I picked up Afro-American feminist tradition in theater. I actually talked about 5 dramatists: Shange, Alice Childress, Alexis Diva, and so on. Believe it or not, when I took it up, people refuse to understand something. And before I answer this question further, I want you all to understand that English as written in India is not even accepted in a few parts of the world. And English as it is written in India also, it has a kind of accusation attached to that. They say that Indians use, I'm also an Indian race, okay? Please don't get me wrong. They say that we use more of a present continuous tense in our writing and speaking. They say, I'm coming, I'm going, it is happening. So still, Indian literature is being read by the world. And when it comes to, I'm not even going to African literature yet. You take Afro-American literature. Afro-American literature is also written in, it's also written in what you call as broken English. When you say something as broken English, what's your standard of English? My question is, English as spoken in Africa, English as used in Africa, it's being used in Afro-American. Can you mute, please? Can you mute, please? Okay. English as spoken in Africa, English as spoken in Afro-America. That is what is being reflected in African literature. It's not broken English. You have to take it up to understand. Whether you say, for example, I'll give an example of Afro-American writing. In Afro-American writing, you will see double negatives more often than anything else. In generally, according to standard British English, you are asked not to use double negatives. But whereas, as part of Afro-American tradition, double negatives are used. Then do you know in Afro-American literature, same thing is true for African literature also. They don't use punctuation marks as we normally use in regular English usage. They don't capitalize. For example, Jacques Change's name supposed to start with a capital N, and then the second part of a name should start with a capital S. But always it is written with a small n and small s. These are all the kind of, what do I say? They are the kind of protests they are making against whoever is called the mainstream. So nothing wrong in taking up Afro-American literature. If you really want another comparison, I can show you. Say, if you want to apply the same standard, then you must not, then there's a rule called Sri Lankan Tamil literature should not be taken into account for Tamil research. That should be true, which is not true. Sri Lankan Tamils use a different kind of vocabulary. For example, Singapore uses another form of, Singapore does use standard English, no doubt about it. Apart from that, Singapore also uses another form of English called Singlish. Singlish is like your Afro-American English. Singlish is like with all la 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 everywhere. For example, it's a kind of an amalgamation. So that should be banned. So what I mean is, learn literature as the country has produced, and feel free to write your commentary on that. You will be enriched totally. Thank you. Yeah, any more questions? Any feedback? Welcome. Feel free to ask me. If I know, I'll let you know. If I don't know, we'll all share with each other.
Ma'am, may I have a question?
Yes, yes.
In spite of humanism and with so many women writers all over the world, and women all over the respected as much as men respected in the society.
Come again? You want to know whether, in spite of all this, are women respected in the society? Is that your question?
Are women, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's precisely what I'm trying to say. The whole of the purpose of this webinar is women are respected in the society, no doubt about it. But the question is the percentage. See, apart from respect, I want people to understand women first. That's precisely why I'm driving at the fact that we all must read writings produced by women, irrespective of whether they are literature or not, women's literature, women's non-fiction, whatever. We have to introduce it to the rest of the world. We cannot say, for example, if Madam Jemima writes something, we should give that book to Mr. Balaji also to read that. That is the point. There's no point in Madam Jemima writing and asking Madam Raji or Vanilla to read it and say this is women's writing, let us keep it among ourselves. No. There should be more and more male students in women's studies department. We should introduce gender studies to more and more male members. We should introduce it to more and more transgenders to make sure that they all understand what goes into the mind-forming content of a woman and what is the point of view of a woman. You see, a woman's language need not always be emotional language. It could be rational language also. Only thing is, I found among women's writing that women writers are more empathetic. They are quite truthful. Their integrity about the society in which they are living cannot be questioned. They have an integrity that they have demonstrated in their writing when they talk about the society in which they are living in. This is the point. So, if you want a respect for women, we should start giving ourselves respect. If Dr. Raji starts respecting herself and Jemima starts respecting herself, the entire world will start respecting each of us. That's it. Any more questions?
Ma'am, there is another question in the chat box. Can I read?
Yes. Yeah, please. You don't need to ask me. Just keep reading. No problem.
Apart from expressing emotional language, how is literature different from the study of philosophy?
Well, you see, the study of philosophy is dry. Okay, the study of philosophy is dry. At the same time, the study of philosophy is also truthful. When you study philosophy, it talks about theories. When you study literature, all your theories are actually experimented upon somebody, and that experimental results are shown in literature. So if you can say that philosophy is theory, I will say literature is practical. That's it. Like chemistry theory and chemistry practical in the lab. That's all. That is literature.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring lecture. From reminding us to read literary books to practicing that in our lives, you reminded us that we should be better human beings in the society. Once again, I wholeheartedly thank you for your lecture, ma'am.
Thank you.
Now I invite Ms. Jemima Josephine, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good noon, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank our God Almighty for giving us the wisdom to organize this program. I thank Him for His presence. Shakespeare says, I can no other answer make but thanks and thanks, in his famous play, The Twelfth Night. I thank our respected principal for giving us the opportunity to conduct the first international webinar. I thank her for always encouraging us. I would like to thank our Vice Principal, Sister Amali Pushpam, for motivating and guiding us in whatever initiative we take. I thank her for her prayers, blessings, and support. Next, I thank our resource person, Dr. Rajeshri Srinivasan, for her brainstorming lecture. You gave us a wide and concise view of African literature, gender studies, women writers from across the world. You covered the entire world literature in one session, ma'am. Thank you. You gave us writers from rare places which we weren't aware before. Thank you for reminding us once again that literature, language, and culture remain inseparable. You instilled in us the spark and the unsaid duty as a literature person to be a better human being so that the world will be a better place to live in. I would like to thank our HOD, Ms. Venila, Organizing Secretary Mr. Amalraj, and Ms. Kartika for their initiative, ideas, and support. I would like to express my gratitude to all the participants across the world for their presence, without whom this program would not have been possible. I thank our students for their contribution, participation, and cooperation. I thank all the faculty in our college for rendering their support emotionally. I express my gratitude to Dr. Guhapriya, Head, Department of Computer Science, and Ms. Devi, Department of Computer Science, for their extraordinary help technically. I thank Mr. Benito for his help in audio visuals. I thank everyone. Thank you one and all. I request all the participants to fill the feedback form correctly to generate the e-certificate. Thank you.